Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get started. A couple things we're gonna do today. First, I'm gonna have you go around and just introduce yourselves again, first name, last name, so I can start to connect names to faces. I'm really bad with names, so just be patient with me. I apologize in advance for my incompetence, but this really is a problematic thing I have. Then we're gonna talk very briefly about positionality and how we're gonna come at these issues this semester. And then we're gonna start our first lecture. I'm gonna end about 10 minutes early today because you have your first assignment. And I'll have you all work on that in class. So, let's just go, actually, let's start from the back today. So Daryl, why don't we start with you? All righty. All right. Aishia, that's so pretty. Okay. And what was your last name? Okay. Oh, and it's phonetic. Yep, that's good. Okay. I don't want to butcher people's names because when I was in like 4th grade, I moved states and people called me Taran instead of Taryn, and I was like too shy to correct them. Until one day they like said to my mom, "Oh, you know Taran," and she was like, "Who's that? Your daughter?" No. So yes, if I butcher your name, please correct me. Alrighty. There we go. Okay, cool. You say that again for me, sir? Okay. And I know you, so I don't know why I was like, who, what? Sorry. Ready. Did you just get added? Okay, awesome. Well, welcome. Awesome. Okay, cool. Do you need a copy of the syllabus? I think I had one. Let me take a look. Yes. I'm like, wait, why are you not on here? Awesome.
Hello, Elijah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, y'all. So, as I mentioned, I want to start by, and I'm trying to start a lot of my classes this way this semester, is to start by thinking about where are we coming from as we study this information. This is something that's being talked about quite a bit in psychology right now, but also something that we are trying to address within sort of intersectional fields. In this class, we're going to talk a lot about how bias can exist within science. And so this is one way of looking at where we are coming from and starting us to get to think about where are the people who have been creating the knowledge coming from. So this is made by Pamela Hayes, who's a psychologist. I put her picture up there to give her some credit. And this is the addressing model. And so the idea is every single person is a mix of a whole bunch of different things. And she uses the term power. I like the term privilege a little bit more because these things don't always directly equate to power. But that each of these things makes us who we are and influences how we see the world, how we conduct science, how we interpret reading that we're doing. And so it's important for us to kind of have in the back of our minds these things. And so I've done mine just to like be fully transparent here. And so age and generational influences. I'm an adult, which is privilege. However, I am whatever the heck you want to call us, elder millennial, a xennial, Oregon Trail is my favorite. And the Washington Post recently had an article where they described us as essentially like the least privileged generation, and unfortunately your generation is gonna have the same issues we are in terms of like, we've seen the least economic growth, we've seen the highest inflation. A lot of people my age still don't have homes because they just can't afford to. So I have an interesting mix there of privilege versus not. Then it looks at both developmental disabilities, so things you might have had from birth, and disabilities acquired later in life. I'm very fortunate right now to be temporarily able-bodied. I say temporarily because not to be morbid, but I could walk out here, fall down the stairs, and then I'm not able-bodied anymore, right? If I hit my head, then maybe I'm not of a sound mind as much anymore. In terms of religion and spiritual orientation, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Most people have never even heard of that. So that certainly has less privilege. I was raised Christian, however, so again, I have this mix there. In terms of ethnicity and racial identity, I am white, or I like to say European American, because we stick identity American on everything but white people. So I think it's important that we point that out. We are not from here, right? So a lot of privilege there, pretty obvious. I'm pretty ghostly pale, right? In terms of SES, I have the privilege to be upper middle class. Wesleyan pays me well, gives me good benefits. My husband is a government civil service worker, also paid well, good benefits. And one thing that's really hard, because I know a lot of y'all are working 2 or 3 jobs to be here, right? And trying to make ends meet. But like all of us in this room have some economic privilege over those folks who could never even consider going to college. So that's weird to think about, and I fully acknowledge that. Sexual orientation, I'm heterosexual, so I have some privilege there. In terms of indigenous, I am non-native. So again, privilege, I am the colonizers, unfortunately. In terms of national origin, I am US born, but I'm 3rd generation Polish immigrant. My grandmother came over on the boat from Poland. My grandfather was the first of his family to be born in America. My mother grew up in a sub-city of Detroit called Hamtramck, that at that time was basically entirely Polish. And as you can imagine, not very economically viable. So certainly I have a little bit of the remnants of that, although certainly we were the immigrants that we were more readily accepting of. And in terms of my gender, I have a mix. So I'm cisgender, which just means I identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. That gives me privilege, particularly in our society right now, right? Where so many laws are being made against people who are transgender, not binary, gender fluid. But I'm a woman, and unfortunately, historically, that means that I have less privilege in some areas. I might make less money, have less access to certain things. If this is something that's of interest to you, this is posted on Blackboard, and if you click this link, it gives you a set of questions to ask yourself about your own identity. They do things, the worksheet's a little different. It looks at physical disability and mental disability, which is sort of interesting instead of acquired and developmental. So if we were to talk about mental issues, I'm someone who struggles with anxiety. So certainly less privilege there. And then I'll show you real quick where on Blackboard that is. So if you go to norms and positionality, I have that. I also have VWU's non-discrimination statement, just so we're all on the same page about that. And then just the group norms that I use for all my classes that comes from the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. So one person talking at a time, using I statements instead of like accusatory you statements. I feel maintaining confidentiality if anyone brings up anything private in class, not going and blabbing it, right? Practice purity of motive. So if someone says something that you think sounds ignorant, right? Assuming they don't have the education about that particular issue, rather than it's, malevolent. It could be, right? ouch than educate. I will try to do this, but sometimes I don't catch stuff and you all do, or I'll be like, ooh, that's harmful. Let me tell you why. Give you an example, not in this class, but in another class I teach. One time I had a student who said, well, I think that everyone with anxiety and depression can just go outside and take a walk and you'll be all right. Yeah, exactly. Those of you who are psychology majors, you're all like, yeah, right. And I actually had 3 students get up and leave the class because they themselves struggled with that. And it was very hurtful. So I had to say, that's really harmful. That's actually not true. And educate that person in the moment. Share the air, so making sure that everyone gets their chance to talk. And then taking responsibility for what each of us says and how we say it. And there are times I'm going to mess up and I will try really hard to own up to that. Alrighty, so now I'm going to dive into our first lecture. And again, the links to these are on Blackboard if you want to follow along or download it for notes purposes. I'm going to see, no, it won't let me stretch it. Okay, that's fine. And so today we're going to start talking about thinking like a psychological scientist. So how do people who do the science of psychology think? How should we be thinking? Because again, thinking about other people's positionality. There are unfortunately psychologists currently who are not using scientific principles. There certainly have been psychologists historically who haven't used psychological principles, scientific principles, or have used them for malicious reasons. One of the things we look at later in the semester is the APA actually about 2 years ago did put out an apology for our racist history. Like psychologists were involved in eugenics and tried to use psychology to justify racism and classism and ableism. And so we need to keep that in mind when we consume psychology or any other science, that as much as we, and I'm someone who does this, as much as I like to say, go to the science, what does the science say? We also need to keep in mind who's creating that science and what biases, what is their addressing model, what are they bringing to the table, and what are their motivations? Most psychological scientists, their motivations are to show scientific truth. Unfortunately, there are some people who bend it to their will. So, just thinking out loud, how do y'all currently determine what to believe? You read a piece of information, how do you decide that's true, that's not true? Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes the bias is really obvious, right? You read a opinion piece in a newspaper, you know, like clearly this person was coming from one side or the other of the political spectrum, right? Yeah. Other ways. You read something on social media. Yeah. Well, the authors, yeah, exactly. So that becomes sort of like, who does have authority? Who do we grant that authority status to and why? Right, that's a question we need to consider. Yeah.
I feel like it's surface level, like a quick cross reference is always good.
Yeah, quick cross reference. If it's something really out there, I still Snopes it. I don't know if other people still use Snopes.com, but it's like sort of the urban legend thing. I remember, so my dad, unfortunately, is of the generation where he'll just believe stuff he reads on social media most of the time. But even he for work, he was in China at one point, and he was like, Snopes doesn't work here. Like the Chinese government blocks Snopes. So he sent me something and said, can you fact check this? Okay. So what people or sources do you tend to trust and why? Well, let's start with like a sub question of this. Do you trust all your professors equally in line or not? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Right, and unfortunately, we've all had that teacher or professor where you just sort of know, like, they're the one that's not all the way with it, right? So you just sort of indulge and fact check, right? And I'll be perfectly honest, there are things that I have learned since I've been teaching that have changed and made my own teaching more accurate. I mean, I'm ashamed to admit, as someone who got a PhD in clinical psychology, no one taught me the term cisgender during my training. I had to learn that after I started teaching here. And I teach gender studies in addition to psych, so that was embarrassing for me, right? So I'm always learning and trying to educate myself. Let's say you're looking at media sources. What type of media sources do you say, yeah, I feel like I can trust that? It's okay to say the obvious ones. So if you want to start with ones you feel like you can't trust. Cable news, right? Particularly, Fox News, MSNBC are known to be biased on either side, so we need to keep that in mind. Right? Most newspapers are okay, but even the Washington Post, which I love and respect, is owned by Jeff Bezos. So like whenever they write something about Amazon, they kind of have to like include a caveat about that in the article. Like they try not to be biased, but they have to acknowledge this is the person who owns us. So I have to be careful what I say.
Like, foreign news channels have no bipartisan, so, and American stories, like, these are, stuff, but I also don't think Twitter is that bad. Like, I don't know. Again, just like taking a bunch of things that are going to.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, that like we can find good information even on social media, right? You just have to sort through the BS. One of my favorite stories kind of related to AI and social media is someone created a Twitter bot. And just like, very pure intentions, let's see what it'll tweet. And based on what people tweeted, added, and how they interacted with it, by the end of the first day, it was a neo-Nazi. Because that's who interacted with it. And that's a big problem with AI in general, is that like, it's only as good as the information you give it. And I think that that's true of people too, right? Like I am someone who's very much pro-vax, for science. I've actually participated now in 3 different trials for new versions of the vaccine, 2 for COVID, 1 for flu. So I've had to struggle as a person who's just like, yes, let's do this, with people who are anti-vax. But they're kind of like that Twitter bot, right? If all you consume is information that tells you vaccines are going to kill you, then of course you're going to believe it, right? And so that's part of what we need to do too, is like all of us, even if we're very well intentioned, get in bubbles and echo chambers, right? Where we're kind of only talking to people that we know. Or that we believe. And so like stretching ourselves to kind of hear what other people are saying and recognizing some of these issues and what is allowed to be taught, right? So has anyone heard what happened, or like the whole story with what's happening with AP psychology in Florida? Yeah, anyone want to give us a little summary of what was happening? Yeah, so it started with, you can't, because Florida has this don't say gay law, right? So you can't teach about sexuality or gender minorities, LGBTQ plus community in AP Psych. And the American Psychological Association said, no, as part of human existence, we need to teach about it. So then they said, okay, you just can't teach AP Psych in Florida at all. And AP didn't back down. And I was actually at the APA convention when they kind of gave in and they were like, okay, you can teach AB Psych the way you want to teach it. But just the fact that people are trying to control information within fields is dangerous, right? Things like you're not allowed to teach about slavery or racism because it's going to make white people feel bad. I don't know, good, right? We should feel bad, right? The euphemisms that are used are unacceptable. I think they've changed this language now, but it used to be when you went to Monticello, they'd be like, well, you know, Sally Hemings was Jefferson's mistress. She was like 12 years old when he started reading. No, she wasn't his mistress, right? He owned her, literally. So again, we need to think about how is information being presented and why. Another interesting thing, you know, again, as much as I love to trust science, it gets politicized. The CDC, they, during the pandemic emergency, at the end of it, would not talk about masking. As soon as the emergency was lifted and like they couldn't like mandate it anymore, they had a huge section on their website about how masks are really helpful. Right, so we're regulating science, sometimes to try not to scare people, but perhaps to their detriment. Oh no, this video was working earlier. But one of the things that we often hear, and I should be able to find some version of this real quick, is that we only use 10% of our brain, right? And so there was this movie a few years back that starred Scarlett Johansson, and I'm not gonna remember the name of it, of course, right now, but what was it?
Back in the day, before blogs and burnt CDs, before you risk getting the bar.
There we go. Say it one more time, sorry. It is Lucy, thank you. Alrighty. I just want the trailer for it. There we go. Okay, so this was the whole concept that we only use 10% of our brain, so if we use more than that, it will overwhelm us and basically our brain will explode, so.
What happened? What did you do to my stomach? What's going on?
You've merely slipped a little package into your lower tummy.
And you're going to transport something very special to us.
English?
No.
You speak English?
Yes.
Take me to the hospital now.
Hospital.
Somebody put a bag of drugs inside me. I need you to take it out. It's leaking.
It is estimated most human beings only use 10% of the brain's capacity. Imagine if we could access 100%. Interesting things begin to happen. Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your research on the human brain. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I have access to 28% of my cerebral capacity. I can feel every living thing.
Since when did you start writing Chinese?
Since an hour ago.
What happens when she reaches 100%?
I have no idea.
You get the feel for it. It's like this sci-fi movie. It's like, oh no, what if you could use your brain? Guess what? We all use all of our brain, perhaps not all at the same time, right? But certainly we have capacity to use 100% of our brain all the time. And in fact, when you do various brain scan studies, you see a lot of the brain lighting up to do various things. Yeah, the psychologist had a fun field day with this when it first came out. There we go. Now we'll leave the other one. Okay. So yes, there are these myths out there. They're in popular culture. They have ideas about various things. This is really interesting. I wonder if there's just like some error with Google Slides. All right, so those of you who've taken intro psych, who remembers who B.F. Skinner was? Yeah. Yeah, so he did chickens with rats, and he was studying behaviorism, and looking at, and the interesting thing about him, kind of the opposite of Lucy, is he thought the brain was a black box and it didn't matter. So here's the psychological myth in and of itself, right? But so he was studying things like, can you teach animals to do certain tasks? If you reinforce them in different ways, does that change their behavior? Well, there's this myth in psychology that Skinner and other behaviorists were doing experiments about babies in a box. And so hopefully this video will play. Okay, good.
My mother remembered me being zippered into a flannel blanket.
So this is, I believe, actually B.F. Skinner's daughter. Just to, like, give us some context here. There we go.
Arms and flipper-like sleeves. And she also remembered my making rather a mess of the bedding, all the laundry. So she said, Fred, can't you do something? Well, of course, my father could do something. Being a problem solver, he would go down and to the basement, and he set to work. He called it the baby tender. So he decided, well, other people might like to know about that, and he sent an article off to the Ladies' Home Journal about this wonderful new bed. If you ever have a book that you send off to a publisher, beware of editors changing titles. They have a habit of doing that, and they want to get the most publicity. So the editor called it Baby in a Box. Not only that, but this was for traveling. This was not even the right box. And in the description, you probably can't read all that, it doesn't matter, but the essence of it is that the baby never got out of the box. Actually, well, I'll tell you that story a little later. And this is the baby tender and what it looks like. So you can see that my sister doesn't look at all unhappy. My father adjusted the thermostat so that it would be right.
So again, the idea that something as simple as changing the title or misrepresenting something almost in an unintentional way, right? They were just trying to get people to read the article, can lead to these misconceptions that like Skinner kept his baby in a box and never took it out, right? No, it was just like a crib alternative to wrapping the baby in a whole bunch of sheets that were gonna be problematic. When we have these misconceptions, why is it so hard to displace them or get them out of our mind? Why do we keep believing these misconceptions? But there are still people to this day who are like, oh yeah, Skinner just kept his baby in a box. Only 10% of your brain issues did it. Again, no right or wrong answers to pretty much any question I'm gonna ask. Yeah. Exactly. So if a lot of people believe in it and you're the one who doesn't, I don't know if folks remember the Ash conformity studies. So these were studies where they brought people in and they thought they were in a room with other participants, but really they were the only participant. Everyone else was like in on it. And they showed them pictures of lines and they were like, which line is the same length as this one? And like everyone in the room said it wrong. And so eventually the participants started saying the wrong one too, even though they could see with their own eyes that the lines weren't the same length, right? So yeah, the humans are social beings, so we have a motivation to kind of like keep the peace go along with it. Another thing is that once we learn something, it's really hard to unlearn it. We kind of have created that memory, that neural pathway, and now we've got to undo it, and that is harder. So there is something called my side bias, if we're talking about things like politically, religiously, things along those lines, where we will rate arguments consistent with our beliefs more favorably. And I've just kind of given you some of the examples of my side bias. People also tend to return to previous beliefs. I saw a couple of colleagues of mine, when I was at APA, we had dinner together, and they were talking about they had been to a session that day where the presenter was trying to teach teachers, elementary school, middle school, high school teachers, that learning styles are a myth, which is true. There's no actual such thing as learning styles. Everyone can use pretty much any learning style. And in fact, people tend to learn the best when you combine different modalities of teaching, which is why I have you guys like do group work and other things. And then I do some lecturing to try to mix it all up. This person, the teachers are very intelligent people. A lot of them have master's degrees. Repeatedly in different studies, trying to teach teachers learning styles are not a thing. And like in the moment, teachers would be like, okay, learning styles are not a thing. And then they'd follow up with them and they'd be like, learning styles are a thing. Right? So even very intelligent people, it's hard to undo. And this gets even more complex when there's a bit of truth to what's being said, right? So truth is often not yes or no. In fact, it's almost never yes or no, right? There's always some nuance, right? Even something like gravity, right? We think of physics as being like very set in stone, but like the gravity on the moon is affected by both the sun and the earth, right? Things along those lines. And so simple cognition is our tendency to reduce complex problems to simple solutions. As humans, we like to have the clearest way possible. We even have like laws about this, that the simplest answer is typically the best one. Sometimes not always, right? And our brains are even wired this way, where our brains create shortcuts for things. And this is one of the reasons why things like prejudice exist and persist, because people like shortcuts. I see a person who looks like this, I can say why about them. Alrighty, so when you hear the word scientific literacy, it's in the name of this course. What do you think? What does that mean? It's okay. If you're like, that's the reason I'm taking the course, Dr. Myers, so you can teach me how it is. That's fine. But you know, what is it? Why should we care? It's not just knowing scientific facts. And a lot of people think that scientific literacy is just memorizing facts in whatever science you're studying. It could be part of it, right? But what scientific literacy really is, I'll move our text box here, is knowledge and understanding of scientific concepts and processes required for personal decision-making, participation in civic and cultural affairs, and economic productivity. So it's how do we harness the power of science to make our lives better, essentially, and make informed decisions for our lives. So, looking at this statement, why would scientific literacy be so important for personal decision making? We'll take each one at a time. If you have to make a personal decision about something, why is being able to understand scientific concepts, the latest scientific literature gonna help? Yeah, no. Exactly, yeah, I mean, and like medicine is both a science and an art still, right? We don't have all the answers in medicine, unfortunately, particularly about things that affect women or gender minorities or ethnic minorities more. A lot of our studies, even in medicine, have been done on white men, right? So, yeah, you need to ask about what are the pros and cons? What are my options? What does the research say about doing this procedure on me, right? Okay, that's great that this has been tested on 70,000 men. How many women have undergone this procedure? Something as simple as the signs of a heart attack are different in women, but we've all been taught the signs of a heart attack in men. Women tend to get more nausea, and rather than going down their arm, their pain tends to be more in their shoulders. We aren't taught that, so we might not recognize that, right? So you need to be informed as you make personal decisions. How about civic and cultural affairs? When you go to the voting booth, why does scientific literacy matter? Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And language and how we present science and how we understand science can really be important, especially when those are the issues that matter most. There was a law that was just signed by Governor Abbott in Texas that basically allows abortions in emergency situations. And the way they got it passed and got that strict Republican governor to sign it is medical professionals help them write the law and the word abortion doesn't appear in anything. It's necessary medical surgeries. You have an ectopic pregnancy, which if you're not familiar is a pregnancy outside the uterus. It's never going to survive and it can actually kill you. You need a necessary medical surgery, right? If we don't use the word abortion for it, then it seems fine, right? So we need to be thinking about what are these things? Are people having late-term abortions a day before their baby would have been born? No, right? But if people put those messages out there, we are scientifically literate about them, we can believe them. How about economic productivity? How can science help us make more money? Exactly, you can see trends, you can look at data. There's a whole branch of psychology called industrial organizational psychology that looks at how people could work more efficiently and better. Stuff like people saying, oh, productivity went way down during the pandemic, so everyone needs to come back to the office. Well, if you look at the data, no, it didn't. And in fact, a lot of people's productivity went up because they didn't have people around them stopping and chatting and things like that, right? They were just there in their house. So yeah, it's about figuring out the best ways we can help to make money, help to be successful. And some of these are really interesting. One of the first IO psychologists did a study where he was trying to look at like, what if the lights are brighter? What if the lights are dimmer? How do people work best? And what he found is that any group that he manipulated something did better. And essentially what it boiled down to when he talked to his participants was, you're showing you care about us. You're showing that you're studying to make us better. And no one else has been doing that, right? So just by having someone care about them, they did better. There should be a lesson for a lot of bosses out there, right? All right, so here is an example of the economics, and actually I'm going to stop here so that y'all have time to do this first assignment, and we'll pick back up with this on Monday. All right, so the easiest way to do this is going to be to go to our Blackboard page and then go to assignments. And what you're going to see is the very first one says psychology departmental assessment. So one of the things we do as a department is try to use science to make us better at teaching y'all. And so I'm not gonna look at how you respond to these. I just need you to fill these out. So you'll fill these out now, and then when you take Psych 495, you'll fill them out at the end, and we'll see how much have you grown and changed from your psychology experience. So again, they're just Likert type scales, which will hopefully only take you 10 minutes or so to fill out. And then whenever you're done filling them out, you are free to go and start your weekend. And I'm here if anyone has any questions or issues. And when you're done, just come back to the assignment and put done, and then I'll give you your 10 points. I need to sign one for Crit, right?
Your copies, they
Okay.
say the exact same thing, but I have you for two
Yeah.
classes, so. And then I did the assessment when I got the email, so I'm not to them.
Yeah, definitely. There you go. You're welcome.